Hope everyone is feeling great and Christmassy because it's coming. And
Yes, it's cold in Sweden, so it starts to feel
yeah,
closer to Christmas, and it's pitch dark all the time.
Yeah.
yeah. How cold do you have, Daniel? We have -6 in Stockholm.
We have 12 centigrade below freezing.
Oh, wow.
Okay, you win.
Well,
I think we need to convert that to our American friends.
yeah.
much is that?
It's
Cold as
about,
hell? No, colder than.
no, not really, but about 10 Fahrenheit, 11.
It's about 80 here, so I'm not going to say anything.
Okay.
Well,
But Damien, you have winter as well. What's your temperature now?
It's not very cold. We're in Washington. We had a bit of snow last week that melted. So Fahrenheit, we're about 41 right now.
Okay.
According to Apple, 41 degrees Fahrenheit. So I grew up in Canada, so I can usually convert, but I grew up in northern Canada, so I have an easier time converting cold temperatures than warm temperatures.
okay.
So 41 Fahrenheit is what, about 10 degrees? Yes.
5 Celsius.
Yeah.
I pulled up the converter now. So.
Okay, great.
It's above
It's
freezing anyway.
Yes. I worry that my RV is sitting and I haven't drained any of the fluids, so it needs to stay above freezing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important.
I have learned that 32 Fahrenheit is the freezing point of water. And -40 is another interesting value because that's the same in both Fahrenheit and Celsius. There the both scales converge. That's really cold.
Okay.
-40 is very cold.
Yeah. All right.
Well, enough about the weather, perhaps.
Yeah. So let's get started on today's presentation or discussion. So I'm going to share my screen, and also if anyone has any topics to bring up, please don't be afraid to do so. You see my screen now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is actually some pretty beta as of yet, a work in progress that we are trying to figure out on how to use. But since, as I wrote in the invite, the web UI and web rendering is taking over more and more, and is the, for all new projects at least, it seems to be the go-to UI strategy. And as such, we really need could use some better feedback on how that will turn out while one is doing it. So having the normal view models, what we wanted to do, because there's lots of possibilities opening up with Microsoft dumping their old Edge or Internet Explorer strategy and Edge strategy, and jumping on the Chromium train, so to speak, so they have the same capabilities as the Chrome browser. And once they did that,
the same rendering engine.
Yeah, the same rendering engine, the same code base. And once they did that, fewer discrepancies and differences are of course visible between the different browsers. And what they also did was package this in a embeddable control that we can in the end use within our other tools and programming languages to and interact with the browser as such, as a rendering engine, and that opens up a few nice possibilities.
Could I just jump in and just mention about the Chrome rendering engine, Hans? Just so everyone knows, I don't know if you have followed that, but I think there will be a huge surge towards Firefox next year, because Google has decided to make it almost impossible to use ad blockers in all Chrome-based browsers from next year. So we'll see how that goes, but I think that it will definitely push me towards Firefox at least.
Well, I'm already there. Have been for years. So thanks for the head up.
Yeah, but it's a bit sad that they taken this turn. But I guess all the ad blockers are killing too much ad revenue,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they feel bold enough now.
Yeah, but it will still be a huge market share, and it's good to be aware with the Internet Explorer was sort of...
Absolutely. No criticism of any of that. I'm just saying that we might see more Firefox after New Year's.
Yeah, good. So currently we are using the VPF renderer engine to visualize how a UI will look in a schematic way. But since we already had this ability to use the turnkey core prototyper that you get started by pressing play here, downloading it and starting it at the specific port. Once you have done that, yeah, maybe I should also bring it up. Once we have done that, we have an easy way to look at the forms this way as well. So let's see, compare. So this is the form, outer forms for class 1. And if I bring this one up, outer form class 1, this is the same. Should be the same anyway, and all essentials. But since these things are already on my local host, I thought that maybe we could just from before we have had this possibility that when we change something and we save, whenever we save we re-render the application, so it's almost live. But to make it even more live, we added this button or checkbox down here, so it can be really live towards the prototyper. So if you have started the prototyper and look on it, and you check this mark, and if anything fails, this will be unchecked, so it will try to stay checked as long as possible. But when this is checked, we actually don't restart the application. We just take the resulting view model definition as XML and post it to this address to a new API that injects the definition of the view model straight away. And if we do that, we whenever we change something here, we get immediate feedback from the running application. So that's one of the new things that comes from this ability, an injection of and this of course works if I want to design another view. I need to navigate to that view from here see, maybe there isn't any data there, so, but now I can see it. And yeah, maybe that was not the correct one. This is so this is view model 2, and this is on. All right, I looked on the wrong thing.
Can you not have them on top of each other?
Yeah, but I need to respect the limited screen size for the recording in order to.
Okay. We see so much more of your screen, so
Yeah,
that's why.
so I share the whole screen, but the recording only goes to the screen marker. So.
I see.
And I need to do that because otherwise it's impossible to see on the video, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
So everything follows along. So that got me thinking that if we can do this fairly easy, would it be possible to actually integrate the web view 2 that the Edge browser, Chromium-based Edge browser is called when it's packaged as a C# component? So we started work with that in this button here, and maybe there are breakpoints still, so we shouldn't use those. Let's see if I can get back. So this way I could sort of let's see, so now this browser is actually integrated into the MDriven Designer, so this is just another window in MDriven Designer. Not sure this is gonna be how it ends up, but currently it is this way. And some of the few things that is mentionable straight off is whenever I navigate the application, I can detect that from the C# code base that navigation has occurred. I can also look into the browser content to see which view model that actually is focused, and doing that I can navigate the application and use the application just as I normally would, and if I then were to let's see if I, so this is obviously one of the improvement areas. If I know which one this navigates to, maybe this one should update as well, so that we are always showing the same thing. I don't know if that's the way we're going to go. I don't think so, because there are going to be a few more additions to this that I have on my list of things that I really want to do. But doing this and moving things around here is directly showing up in the browser. So the next obvious step then, or on the wish list so to speak, would be to be able to turn on so that you could drag on these straight away and not needing to be here at all. And I think that will be possible, but it will take some more work. Initially, what we do now with this edit button is that we inject new controls into the DOM, and having done so, we can sort of highlight where the different controls are. So what we want to do is be able to drag these, and haven't really finished that work, but I'm gonna show it anyway where we are at.
I guess that only really applies on if you're doing UI with a grid, not with a new placing container things.
Yeah, yes and no. There will be different. You will still be wanting to drag these around, but the target areas will be different, and the where to target things will be different. So I haven't figured everything out, far from it, but this is work in progress, and I thought that I should show it so that we could have a just share the ideas. So I'm just gonna change the code from the compiled code here, and when I do that, whenever I drag something, I can see now I just highlight all the areas in the CSS grid where we can drop things, and the general idea is to be able to drop a thing on a new position, and then but that doesn't fully work yet. What we want to do then is to do the same thing as we do in this normal UI, just move it around and then send it back to the server to re-render it. And that would in the end bring us to an environment where we could, within this frame showing a standard browser, be able to use the application as is, with all the actions and edit data and save stuff if stuff changes, and still turn on edit and move things around and have the main model updated. The data that we pull from here, I think this will only be valid for integration towards the localhost core turnkey, and why not on the server? Well, on the server, of course, there will be a more lag because there's network between the server and the designer, but also there's security implications. Us being able to inject a whole new definition of the view model is potentially it's a potent tool, because, well, the view model, you can define anything and all expressions are valid. So you could we don't want this kind of backdoor on a server system. It's only supposed to be a development tool, and you shouldn't be able to develop a running system, so to speak. That's at least my philosophy. I think that's a built-in problem of many of the other tools, that there's no real difference between design and production. If we go back and look at Access, and if we look at Excel, and if we look at all these different kinds of tools, they are sort of mixed production and design. And of course that makes some things easier, but also some things almost impossible.
Hans?
Yes.
So this is, you're running a browser inside the designer, but it's accessing the local turnkey core, right?
Yes.
Or is it running inside the same process, a web server?
No. So that's another limitation, since we're still on .NET Framework for the designer. And why are we on the .NET Framework and not on Core Framework? Well, it has to do with the Visual Studio 2022 being on .NET Framework still. 2024 we think will be on the Core Framework, but to limit the crap work to just make things to maintain multiple projects, we won't go to Core for the designer just now, I think.
So I don't know exactly how you have done this, and I'm sure there's many changes. I've just, asking or mentioning that if you have made this like a built-in feature almost of the client to move these things around, then potentially that could be sent back through the normal client API. Could it? But it's not the same, maybe. Or I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
But the model is not available that way, I guess.
No,
The
so
designer.
we need the design time description of the model, because what happens if once we have the model with diagrams and everything, that's one representation that's available in XML files, but it's not necessarily so when we have it in runtime. Then the model is pulled from the generated code in some cases, and from the modeler file in other cases when we run it on. So it's quite many levels of abstraction and description that one needs to keep track of. But the main idea is to use the turnkey application from core to signal what changes you want to do, and then actually do the changes in the main model and have those propagate back to the MDriven core, and then it will show them. So it's a bit of a round trip, but and the fidelity of the result will be 100%. There will be no difference to design time or the view that you get from here. Once you turn this off, this edit off, you're back to absolutely untouched front-end rendering. And that would then work with the controls, components, injected components, and your own style sheets and assets and everything, making it a true wysiwyg description of the whole application. Plus, I think that it would be equally easy to point to actions and say that you want to opt in or opt out something, and have that propagate back to the model. So once there's a level of bootstrapping here, of course, you need to be able to run the application. You need to have a screen to show in order to change it this way. Of course, we can add controls on the side here to inject new stuff, and probably that's where it's going. It's going to be something like this, but for the web. But I sort of, when I started doing it, I first only had the view model displayed, but it turned out pretty cool that you could run the whole application and just jump to another view and know which one it is, and be able to turn on edit on that and be able to change that straight away just as easy. So that's another way to navigate the result by using the application rather than having to search for it in a list of all available views. The one thing doesn't need necessarily to exclude the other. We can have both, but this is a way that we haven't really done before, actually using the application to navigate between the definitions in the application. I think that's
really cool. And I don't want to mess with you, so don't take this as like but would it be, one thing I'm just thinking of now, what if the designer had a port, or like was listening to an API, and then you could add stuff if the normal client, like when it's running turnkey core, you could just say, hey, talk to the designer, it's over there. But maybe that's more complicated than this, but
And the
see
problem
what I
is
mean?
that
So it's like,
the framework. I think it's. I've been sort of playing with the idea to integrate all the logic from Turnkey into the designer, but it's not necessarily a great thing. They might bloat each other's. So it's a different process now, and it communicates over HTTP, over the net, or over the internal net. I don't see a current problem with that and having it separate. Also, there's lots of things.
I don't know, maybe I think I meant maybe that's exactly what you have done here when you say it's communicating. I just meant that this browser window here can say, it's like, hey, move this button to this position over HTTP to the designer, not the whole thing.
Yeah. Right. So that's one thing of doing it, to have the feedback from the server back, so that the designer also would be a server. Then we would have
A tiny one with...
Yeah. That would definitely exclude the application being on a different network, which I said that we shouldn't use anyway because of the security implications. But I hadn't definitely ruled it out, because then this server must be able to reach the client. The way we do it now is that we inject into the DOM with C# to C, and we use JavaScript and inject JavaScripts into the DOM to catch behavior. I think it will be okay, and I think we can do everything we want to do, but I'm not 100% sure. And of course, doing JavaScript is time consuming and very error prone. So you only change one letter at a time, and then you test everything. Yeah, so I think it would be a cool way to get. It won't be, because the earlier versions of wysiwyg editing of Turnkey API that I've tried have been based on the server alone, that the server doing the work. But this is much more potent, having the designer doing the actual work and the server only rendering the result. I think this is much less work for us, and harvesting all the investments that we have done in the designer to make that know stuff. It knows all kinds of stuff, like being able to analyze all the expressions to see what's actually used, and thousands of things that it can do that we would somehow need to move over to the runtime environment, to the Turnkey server, and then it shouldn't even be used in production on the production server. So that has had me bothered quite a bit on how to do this separation. And I think once I started addressing it this way, things became much clearer on what we can do and why we should do it.
The benefit I was looking for maybe with not having the in-designer browser was this, that then you could use Firefox and go to the local Turnkey core and And then when you move things there, or you could have it actually even on a phone. No, well, at least in an emulator on your machine, and then move it there too, and it would be like a separation of it.
Yeah. So
But,
there's nothing
do
stopping.
the easiest first.
There's nothing stopping you from looking at the result on Firefox when moving around, because the thing I showed moving these around actually do move on the server, or in the end it turns out on the server. So everything is you can just as well watch this in Firefox to see the effect. But the feedback from moving here needs us to catch what's happening in the browser, so to speak. And doing that, we need to enclose it in something so that we can catch the events.
So Hans, what is the status of the placing container? Because I think I missed out there on. Because that I found quite hard to understand. So
Yeah, so this will work in an equal fashion with the placing containers. There's really nothing. Let's see if we have any examples of it here. No. Okay, so if I take this and turn it into a placing container, saying that this is a column, there's nothing to, let's see, I'm just gonna move these things. So this is out from class 1, and if I were to watch this over here, so this is out from class 1. It didn't, yeah, maybe that was too big a change. Do a refresh of that one. Once we are here and we have live update on, if I do things like I want to change the order of these things, it will follow along, and of course we will be able to drag these and change the order here, and the placing container will get its own type of not a blue dot, some other color dot to signal that it's a placing container. And we also need to do stuff for the nested placing containers.
yeah, that was
To easily get that working. But I hadn't seen this before. Maybe this is old news to you, but at least in the Microsoft implementation of the Chrome container, you have this 3D view of the web UI. Have you seen this?
no.
No.
So now you can see how
A Z order of stuff.
yeah, so you can zoom it, and once you know where things are, you can do things like let's see, if we click one of these, anyway, it's hard to show on the small screen, but if I click things here, they are selected in the UI. So this is a really good cool way to understand why am I not hitting the thing that I want to hit. Where is everything? Have you seen this, Dennis? So,
I haven't seen it before.
no. So
First time, but
It's in Edge, yeah.
yeah. So
yeah.
basically, I found it by finding something with a set index or set.
Yeah, set index is only one value,
Yeah.
which can affect like the
The depth.
This,
It's
yeah.
the depth of the elements.
Yeah. And let's see. Oh, right, that only resetted it, but
I think we need to let Philip in now.
yeah, to
Yes, he
Question
was gonna. Yeah, his new app.
mm. Yeah, sure.
But I mean, I told Philip 10 minutes, or maybe we need 50 in total with questions and everything. Is there anything else that you would like to discuss or go over, Hans?
No, this
So then
is
we don't jump
pretty
back.
much what I intended to show, and it's a work in progress. So there will be, if no one says that I should stop doing this and focus on something completely different, this is what I will try to get going to get a working prototype of, so that you can try it
Exciting.
as a Christmas present, maybe. All right, should I hand over to you, Philip?
If you feel done,
Yes.
sure. All right. I mean, can I cast over you? Or
I was gonna stop presenting and
so I was given a task by Hans, Lars, and Johan to design an application for managing or reporting your migraines. And since I'm new to this, they told me to slow down and do what I can. And so that's what my main goal of this was to test myself and see what I can achieve. So I'm gonna just share my screen. You can see.
yes.
So at the moment I'm showing my GitHub page because I'm usually, when I do stuff, I like to have a README file where I can document what I'm doing. So if anyone else besides of Hans and Lars and Johan wants to read this, because it's quite a lot of text, I'll be happy to send it to you. I'll start off by showing my designer, what I've done in it so far. And at the moment, doesn't look much. But what I've done is set up a login page so that when the user logins to, well, as in the local host at the moment, you have to log in to see the application with the index page. And after that, I have begun slowly building it up. And my first focus was to set up the basics of the page, where things are going to go and what page is for what, so to say. And the how to move from one page to another, which for me was quite tricky but very fun to learn, how to make a view model go to another view model via a button click. And here is what I've done so far. So I just log in. And you come to this page. So at the moment, I'm having the sysuser show me with which account I'm on, so I can see that this account is for that one, and so different one doesn't show out. And I've designed the layout of the movement between pages via these buttons. So for the migraine report, where you're supposed to report your migraine, when it started, when it ended, and what date it happened. And then what triggered it. So was it your stress level that triggered it, or was it your consumption? Did you drink too much wine, or did you exercise too little or something? And then you report that one to the database. And let's say you've gone over a week, then you're supposed to see a graph, and that's been I've been trying to figure out with the wiki how to show a graph, but it seems like quite a tricky problem. But this is the page that shows the information of all of your reports, basically, versus your lifetime log, which is your overall logging. So you don't just log your migraines, you log your everyday activities, basically. So you have something to compare with. And then I managed to do the app settings. So if you want to log or see your consumption, stress, exercise, sleep, that's what this is supposed to do. And then just a final touch, the account information page at the moment.
Yeah, I think you're correct in your deferral of the graphs. They are not necessarily extremely complex to do, but the important thing for doing a graph is knowing what you're doing a graph for. So be able to collect the data, and having order on the data is the first thing, and then once that is done, there are multiple ways to go about doing a graph, depending on if it's going to be interactive or if you want to point at it and click in some way. So that we will talk about that for sure. Good.
So that's what I've done so far in the project. There's loads to do, and I'm still building it. I was doing it after work today when I came home, finishing some stuff. So it's something that I'm always working with. So it's still a work in progress.
Good. Looking good. I can see that you do progress, and that you are not stuck.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I think-
I just, go ahead, Larry.
Okay. Now I'm just thinking, as Hans said, about making the graph, doing all the input and the ability to add data, because when you come to the point where you feel like, yeah, now I really need a graph to take me further, then you need the data to be able to visualize it. Otherwise, your graph will be, something empty. And how good does it look to look at an empty graph when you do it? So with the data, and then you can look at some things, like we looked at this SVG example. I don't know if you were there, Philip, but in an earlier talk, Hans showed, for example, that if you have an SVG as a graph, a simple graph, you want to do a simple one, you can quite easily just paste in stuff and say, this is SVG, and it will, boom, draw stuff on screen. Very, very easy. So if it's not super complicated and you want to, hover and look at details and stuff, that's a good start, because as usual, make the easy first and then add on complexity.
Yeah, that was going to be tomorrow's project.
Yeah.
I have a bit of a question. Is because I make lots of graphs and I try and make them very interactive and very easy for users to select different things to graph. And often I want, to collect data from a selected attribute inside OCL. And, to make that generic is I do it, but in order to do it, I mean, inside the OCL, there's no sort of equivalent of a sort of what is the value of this attribute, and the attribute is passed in as, a selected attribute from a list of attributes, because the list of attributes is a string list, and you can't pass in a string to an OCL and get it inside of a view model to get it to represent that. So, I mean, you can do it outside with a query, but not inside.
Yeah, so when sending in structured data or complex data, we one option is to create transient classes of it to have that as something available in the model, and then it's really easy to to rumble through it. But as you say, if you want to do it completely generic to be reusable, I guess you could do sort of a transient name value pair thing, so that you could represent anything within.
And that's the way I end up doing it. I use transients, but I mean, I remember not just fairly recently, Lars saying that the view model is supposed to be kind of like a transient.
Yeah, yes, and it is within itself, but as you have discovered, it's not very suitable for giving its definition to others. So those definitions that you do in the view model sort of stay in the view model. It's like Vegas that way.
Sure. It's limited. It's ring fenced. Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing for the opacity of the patent, that this is what you do here is for here. And as soon as you discover that I do it here, but I also want it somewhere else, then you should think maybe this is a derived attribute or derived association, something on the model rather than in only this view. And of course you discover those needs all the time, and you struggle a bit and think that, well, maybe I don't need to move it just now, it's just one more time, and then you repeat it in a view model, and then you discover that you need it a third time, and then you're really sort of learning that you should have done it the right way from the start. So I guess that's what every developer discovers all the time, that there's no way to know.
No, I actually started doing it what I think is probably the right way, and with a heavy use of transients and derived associations. But basically, I was trying to see if there was a more efficient way to do it, leveraging the view model thing.
So I think you're on the right track with doing the transients and things like that. One sort of roundabout way to handle it that everyone else does is when handling structured data, especially if you need to send it over the net and everything, is doing JSON of things. So being able to turn something into JSON with the Tyson operators is that uses view models for their definition is one way, and that's also a really cool way to do sort of duck typing and generics that you did, Lars, this translate thing.
Shouldn't your view model be all about the, poor phrasing, but the business logic of the interface? You know, this button's enabled because the data is now dirty, or this changes color because the data's out of spec, or whatever, right? View model should be about that user interaction, because I make this mistake all the time because I don't have view models, whereas a transient class, in my opinion, is really business logic about a specific type of task.
Yeah.
Right. I use transient classes all the time, and it's all about, okay, my user's trying to do this. So I build a machine to guide them through it. But what you got to be careful of is in that machine, I think you need to then not put in logic that's really designed for UI. And that should be your view model.
Yeah, so I would like to say that the view model's basic use case is being the perspective of information. So no matter what, if it's a user interface, that's a perspective of some sort of, it's a window in for a use case of some sort. But there are different kinds of windows in to the model, and that might be a REST API, or it might be a some kind of more complex detail, like a JSON structure or something. So I shouldn't limit it to only user interface. It's the perspective per se. But then I agree with you with the machinery idea that as soon as there's logic that actually mangles data in any way, it's usually much better to think of it as part of the model and move it to state machines and having the representation of this in stored in classes. And definitely if you sort of end up getting a lot of variables in your view model, then you're probably lacking in moving things backwards. Because one thing that I am helped by thinking is that what if there's a power break right now? So everything should be able to go, and I should still be able to come back fairly where I was. Maybe the thing
As a user, you mean?
Yeah, as a user. And of course that's not primarily designed for power breaks, but there's lots of different breaks in business. Someone calls you, someone pulls you away, you need to do something urgently, and you will always leave things unfinished, and you need to be able to trust that. I think it's a good to be nice to the user to be able to just come back and continue next week. And that turns out that makes it really scalable as well. You don't need to hold a lot of things in memory. Everything is back to the database, and then you increase the state of the machine. So I had this example where we did a distribution system for newspapers way back in the 90s, and there were like hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and everything needed to be done in one batch because they could come in and new the subscriber at any time. So we needed to lock the whole database to distribute these, to be able to chunk it up into the different parcels that would go out to the different neighborhoods. And it locked everything out, and it was a poor design from start. And we needed more and more computer power to actually do it. But it was a crappy design, and with a few state machines, it would have been much better to signal that these are the ones that are included in the transaction that we will do soon. These are the ones that we have already done, and piece by piece, taking our time. Maybe it would take up to a minute, but at least no one would have been locked out during this minute.
Can I add to your answer? I usually think that in view models, when I reach, 10 variables or something, it's time to start thinking about classes instead, transient or whatnot. And then also adding to Hans about view models, I think they should be, as you put it sometimes, Hans, also very technical, but it's when you need to turn circular reference data into something else, and that can be a screen, it can be an API, that they are double-ended, but also don't forget about when you just need to transform data. So if you need, for some reason, to collect and sum up things to be used later, use view models to transform from one thing to another. And there we use this, as you mentioned, also duck typing, Hans. You mentioned it slightly different, but you can have two parts of your own model, and you have two different needs. One is for the editing part, going on, and then you have like the part where, let's say, you are creating invoices or reports. When you invoice, you want to convert the order to an invoice, maybe. Do that by describing the transformation in a view model. It gets very easy to understand that transformation then, and then you can have like read-only copies. So because usually it's a bad design pattern to say like, yeah, I'm going to reference a customer from this invoice all the time, because then you can't see what actually happened at that point in time. So you want to basically copy a lot of stuff into this archival part, more like, or the next step of your work. Do that with view models is very, very good, because then you have very good control and you can see exactly what's happening. So that's another great use. So yes, but the view models have turned out to be much more versatile than I ever expected.
Yeah.
And there's an operator for that, the transform operator.
So whenever you see a pattern that you want to reuse and the pattern is bigger than a class, then you should think about a view model. And I think one use case that you did, Lars, is rather good, that you have lots of reporting or emailing, that you want to send emails about different events. And the email is very similar. All the emails are similar. They all have a header and a subject, or a subject and a message. But the thing that you want to email about is totally different. There are like 10 different use cases for that. But having a transformation from the different use cases into the same email sort of reduce and it just discovers where is the email pattern in this structure that I want to email about. Well, it's these things that I want to pick. Okay, pick those and say that once instead of doing it in repetitive code. Just do a transformative view model and apply that whenever you need to send an email, and things sort of fall into place. And the day that you discover that you want to send yet another type of message that isn't an email, then you have a structure available for doing that for all the use cases that you have used email for before. Good.
We're out of time.
Time has run out. So thank you very much for showing up, and we will.
Good luck, Philip, building more and more.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing.
Yes, I think there will be. Sorry. No, I think there will be one more session before Christmas, but I'm not sure. I will get back to you on that. Super, thanks.
Did Damien or have a question or something? I can answer that if you want to, or Derek, or anyone. After the others have left, I mean. No? No? Okay, good.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you. Looking at it.
Thanks, Hans. Thanks, Lars.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, good evening.